Welcome back to Vuka Africa. I'm Gerry Elsdon. Nations may rise and fall and men may die, but what truly stands eternal is the human spirit, human nature, and our endurance that we're able to, and tolerance that we have as human beings. And this morning, we would like to just extend our heartfelt condolences to the families of those who have passed in Kenya. And we need to say that I personally must say that I condemn the inhumane and the senseless acts of violence at the Westgate Mall in Kenya, which has resulted in the death of 39 people and have injured about 150 people so far. It deeply saddens me that we are unable to live together as societies across the continent and across the world and not bring such heartbreak to people around us. And even having said that, I have in the studio with me a young man by the name of Pie-Pacifique Kabalira-Uwase. He is a Rwandan-born national who has made South Africa his home, but also does the most amazing work. And it's actually quite fitting that we have you in the studio when the emotion around what has happened in Nairobi is still so high, because you in fact are a child of struggle, are you not?
Well, I've had a fair share of I suppose I would say the worst that humanity can endure. Growing up in Rwanda, and I was only 14 when the genocide that you would have heard about in Rwanda took place in 1994.
Only 14.
Yes.
How did that impact your life? What was your life ahead of that? What was your family circumstances like? And how did things change for you?
We had quite a country that was being increasingly polarized just before the genocide. The war started in 1990. I was only 10. In a happy family. My mother raised the three of us after my father's passing in 1989. But when the war broke out in 1990, suddenly there was this polarization around ethnicity. There was nowhere to hide from it. Certainly it was just Hutus and Tutsis and who is on which side. Unfortunately, because of my father's political profile, he was a political prisoner in the early 80s, we were considered traitors by the government. And so by the time when the genocide started, we were already living in fear, and we were on the list of people who had to die along with the Tutsis.
And what was that like for a 14-year-old between the ages of 10 and 14, when you're beginning to come into your own and you're beginning to discover that life as you experience it is not that of every ordinary child where you live?
It's quite a sad thing to be exposed to those experiences at such a young age. I would credit my mother for shielding us from a lot of the division, because she raised us to not be that polarized. But just discovering that there is this othering as a young child, there is us and them, and knowing that we are in a context where we are considered as the other.
Yes.
It was quite frightening. The only problem also was that there was a sense of resignation at some point, because there was nowhere to hide from it and there was nothing to do about it. And so, on the other hand, life was going on as normal. I mean, at 10, I was in school. I finished high school at 12 in 1992, and then I went to high school in 1990. The end of 1992. When the genocide started, I was in my first year of high school. Now, some aspects of life were going on as normal, and we were all living together as Rwandans, but politically it wasn't. And we were all aware of it.
And then the upstart of violence within your community,
yes.
Suddenly, because we as human beings, it's not a part of our everyday living. It's not something that occurs to us. It's certainly not something that is in the mind of a high school student. Yes. And the degree of violence that came into your society and your community versus what one may experience out of a car accident, for example, or an incident in the neighborhood, is quite different.
It is very different. As you said, for example, in Kenya, where one would not have expected that, it suddenly happens, and people witnessed that, and there are people who survived it. Now, in Rwanda, just before 1994, there was a war between the rebels and the government. Now, you would hear about displaced people, you would hear about people who died. Some members of my family were killed during that time, just before 1994. But it was in the context of war. However, when the 6th of April happened, the presidential plane was shot, and suddenly the whole country was engulfed in this violence.
Yeah.
It was so sudden that there was no way that anybody could prepare for it.
Not that one can prepare for violence,
Absolutely
but
not.
to this extent, it had to have just been, the country was shaken to the core.
Yes, and we lived in the capital city. In fact, the first night into the genocide, the army came for us, for our family. They killed 2 people at home. They threw a grenade in the house. They shot my mother in the eye. They did a lot of atrocious things. I was saved by neighbors. It's a night I can talk about for a long, long time.
Having said that, though, I listen to you and I watch you speak. I listen to the tone of your voice.
Yes.
You strike me as a gentle soul. And so I must wonder the impact it must have had emotionally must have been great. And yet you've been able to overcome, because not only did you endure all of that, but you've managed to create a great success out of your life. How does one finish high school? Let's begin there. How does one complete high school under those circumstances? What was your experience?
My experience was particularly mixed. So after the genocide, there was no government and no structures. So I had to leave school to become a business boy, to take care of my family. At 14, I was the breadwinner of my family. I went to school fairly accidentally. It was an intention to get a student card to show at roadblocks so I can attend to rural area markets.
Interesting.
What happened is that the printers were late, so I pretended to be a student 2 weeks more than I anticipated. During those 2 weeks, 2 teachers noticed me, and they talked me into staying in school. And then I discovered a passion for science. I changed schools, and I did very well. Unfortunately, in 1998, which is 4 years after the genocide, things continued to happen in the country. Many people may not know. But my brother, my younger brother, who was 2 years younger than me, was killed in 1998 in a village massacre. My mother was held in a military camp in a cell for several months, and I was at home with 8 children to look after.
Oh my.
So what you hear about child-headed homes, I knew about that.
You were the parent of one of those.
I was the parent of one of those at 18. Now, when I look back, I'm very grateful for a lot of the learning that I can now deduct from it. However, it takes a lot of time to soul search to find that side that one can appreciate about those experiences.
And then at some point, of course, your intellect, your intelligence is recognized by, and this is the wonderful thing about life, sometimes not by us ourselves,
yes,
but it is recognized by those outside. Who were those people who saw your potential and who recognized that you had a lot more to offer the world than just the sad story about a young Rwandan boy who didn't have the life that he was meant to have?
Yes, the first person was, after my father died, somebody who was renovating our house, the chief builder. He took great interest in my education. He helped me to learn a lot of things. I remember particularly here in South Africa, it's something that will be relevant. On the 11th of February, 1990, he instructed me to listen to radio because something great was happening. And the release of Nelson Mandela was broadcast live on radio in Rwanda. So I had to pass a quiz that evening by him. So that's how rigorous he was early on. And then the teachers, of course, who noticed me. And I feel quite sad with what is happening with teachers and learners here in South Africa at the moment. I think there is a sense of discomfort about the relationship between learners and teachers here.
Yes.
I do respect teachers so much. They really discovered my potential in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do myself.
Yeah.
And then many years later, in South Africa, I was at university, the University of KwaZulu-Natal.
How did you get to South Africa? Let's not skip that part. It's probably quite interesting too.
So I resisted leaving my country for a long time because I didn't want to leave my mother and my sister behind, and the children that I was looking after. But eventually it became about the family, not just about me, because my mother was very worried that I would suffer the same fate as my brother. And so eventually in 2001 I left, and I didn't know where I was going. It was not about where I'm going, it was about where I'm coming from. It was about getting out of there. I went to Tanzania, and then eventually I decided that I was going to go to Madagascar, still guided by my intention to go to university wherever I will end up. But I couldn't see it happen in a non-French speaking country. So I set out to go to Mozambique, looking for a way to go to Madagascar. I didn't find a way to go to Madagascar. I ended up in Maputo very sick, and I met somebody randomly who said, look, you have a legitimate reason to apply for asylum in South Africa, and this is your last chance.
Wow. We're talking about little miracles, sometimes large miracles, and sometimes the enduring spirit of human beings that will take them from a road least traveled and hardships to dreams that one could only ever imagine to be written in fantasy. Our conversation now is with Pie-Pacifique Kabalira-Uwase, who is a Rwandan-born individual who has made his way to South Africa through many, many hardships, as well as the wars and the atrocities of Rwanda, to South Africa to become a university graduate, recognized by the Archbishop Desmond Tutu Foundation, and now is part of an organization called More to Life. More of that when we get back. The desire to become everything you're meant to become is something that only you can do. I mean, if you wake up in the morning saying, this is what I would like to be, but you don't put the work into what it is that you need to be, it's really pointless, is it not? On the couch with us is Pie-Pacifique Kabalira-Uwase, who is a Rwandan who went through a life of all the atrocities that one could have experienced living and growing up in Rwanda, made his way to South Africa, and from my readings started out on the beaches of Durban, sometimes working as a car guard, but somehow made it into university and out of university, and has been given honors, which we will continue to discuss, by organizations across the country. But also, more importantly, he works with an organization called More to Life. And now to discuss with us the value of the experiences and the lessons that are truly inspiring through the courses that are given by More to Life is Ms. Vijay Reddy joining us. I want to know from you, Vijay, what is More to Life?
More to Life is a part of a foundation called the Kairos Foundation, which Kairos is actually a Greek word that stands for moment in time. And so we're a non-profit organization whose aim is to be a global educational resource which facilitates people to access their highest potential, to overcome separateness in the world. That's quite a theme when you talk about Kenya and what's happened, and when you talk about Pie-Pacifique's history. How do you get over such a debilitating, horrific past? How do you, when you look at Kenya now and what's happening, the norm would be for people to react in a destructive way. If bad is done to you, you want to not turn the other cheek.
Respond in the same manner.
Actually react in much the same manner. So what this More to Life program does is equips you with tools, practices that help you to access your highest values and to empower others to do the same.
Now, Pie-Pacifique, just to come back to you, because as you can tell, I'm quite enamored with everything that has happened for you.
Yes.
You were twice nominated for the Archbishop Tutu Leadership Fellowship in 2008 and 2009, and there are other honors also. And that is all good and well, but you still sit with this past, which was not the easiest and wouldn't be easy for any human being to endure. And then along comes an organization like More to Life. But you'd already known that, didn't you? That there needed to be more to life.
I had already begun seeing that there is another way, and that there is a way for me to claim a space in this world. What More to Life has given me was an opportunity for me to do it differently. So instead of me fighting against life and against my past, I learned to embrace it so that I can learn from it. Because as difficult as it may sound, all experiences, including the worst that we can possibly imagine, have a gift in them for us. And what it is that More to Life has given me are tools to discover what those gifts are. Now that I know that happens in the world, and now that I know I have first-hand experience, which, by the way, now I'm beginning to see it as a privilege, because as a human being, I haven't been spared from anything. I sit here with that vast experience. What do I do with it now? And how do I choose to be in the world today? And that's certainly something that I would say More to Life has helped me with.
And Vijay, those are some of the most important points that you can make for us to stop thinking that these were mistakes, errors, and so on, but in fact to take it and to say, what was the lesson learned here? What was the outcome meant to be? And if the outcome has already been experienced, what is it that I can teach going into the future? Is it not, Vijay?
Yes, absolutely. You know, what typically is the reaction to people when they have challenges in their lives is to seek for what the gift is. I don't know any other methodology, myself personally, that facilitates that kind of access of this gift. It's, you know, one of the major things that the More to Life program is based on is a tenet that says there is no event in your life through which life is not coming to you to awaken you to your highest, most noble self, even the tragic and horrific ones that P has been through, and many other people too. So it's how do you do that? How do you find, when you have personal tragedy, when you have divorce, when you have day to day, which is resigning or retrenchment or you know, the loss of a loved one. How do you find what is the gift there, and how do you then move forward, taking what you do know?
Pie-Pacifique, how did you discover More to Life?
I was enrolled. The way that it happens, More to Life is created continuously by people who have done it. It's the most interesting volunteer organization I've come across. If you've done it, you decide that you want other people to experience it, you create it in Johannesburg or in Cape Town or in Durban, and then people who have done it enroll people to do it. And so I was enrolled by a lady by the name of Anne Pratt, who was a speaker at the Brightest Young Minds conference, where I was a delegate. That's how I met her. I invited her to speak to a group of refugee women that I was helping to organize themselves in Durban. She came, she spoke to them, and then she told me later, actually some of the things I was saying, I learned them somewhere. I'd like you and two of the refugee women to go to this weekend. It happens to be the More to Life weekend. So I had no, that's back in 2005, and I didn't know what to expect. Out of much respect that I had for her, I went. But it turned out to be not a workshop. and not just an ordinary experience.
I would imagine that it's, in fact, a lifestyle and not a workshop.
It is a way of being.
It is a way of being.
Yes.
Because in order to remember and to focus on the fact that there is more to life, you have to practice it, inculcate it into your life, and you need to output it, isn't it? People need to see that you're living a life where you're exuberant and a life that is full and whole.
It's the same way that when we have our spirit contaminated by the anger and the resentment, the same way that we can't contain it. It leaks out in one way or another, is when you embrace love and connection and the ability of living the highest noble self. It's also, you can't contain it. It leaks out. And I would rather be bringing that more into the world than the opposite. So how do I do that proactively? And how do I do that with everything that happened and still happens in my life? How do I respond and stand up to say, I am about connection rather than separation? And that's really the challenge. And many people would think that it's extremely difficult to do that, given what one would have experienced.
Yes.
But actually, it's like riding a bicycle.
Yeah, and the trick with riding a bicycle is you're going to fall a few times at the beginning.
Yes.
You're going to need some training wheels. You'll give up. You'll throw down your helmet a few times.
Yes.
But once you're on, please stay on.
Yes.
And once you're on, every time you get on, the body will simply, the mechanisms that makes the bicycle move, your body, their bike, will simply flow together, isn't it?
That's how it becomes a way of life. The more you train yourself to respond rather than react, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And also, of course, the support. The one thing I appreciate in More to Life is the amount of support that there is in the what we call communities.
How do we find out more about More to Life? Where do we go?
Well, we have a center in Johannesburg.
Yes.
So people can call on 011 482 5665.
Is there a website?
There is a website, www.moretolife.org.
All right, so it's www.moretolife.org.za is where you go if you want to try and discover an inner self that is not only at peace, but actually knows that it doesn't matter what you may be experiencing now. If it is negative, if it's not urging you to move forward, if it's not giving you the tenacious spirit that you believe you do have, there is more to life.